Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and welcome back to another episode of the Speculation series for the next Three Kingdoms title from Creative Assembly. So in our last few episodes, we mainly talked about character design, but starting with this episode, we'll shift our focus to the RTS battle elements in the game. And since Total War Three Kingdoms is mostly a single-player game, the changes I'll be suggesting will largely center around the single-player campaign experience, even though with the advancements shown in Warhammer 3 with up to 8 players in co-op with simultaneous turns, I do hope the next Three Kingdom title will also have a more robust co-op system, as PvP is always more interesting and challenging than PvE. Now, the first thing that I feel needs addressing are the issues with siege weapons and siege battles in Total War Three Kingdoms. As someone who swears by trebuchets in campaigns, it does pain me a little to know that these amazing counterweight trebuchets didn't exist during the Three Kingdoms period. And even if they did, no army would ever haul them around on campaigns, as you only built siege weapons when you have a siege battle. But that comes back to the point of game design. Sieges are incredibly hard in real life, and if the defenders have the resolve to not surrender, then sieges usually involve a lot of time trying to starve out the defenders, as during the Three Kingdoms period, siege technology was very rustic. Mobile siege towers and counterweight trebuchets both didn't exist. Running ladders to the wall is never the best idea, so most attackers either try to dig underneath the wall or pile enough dirt to build a ramp that would go over the wall. Both took time, and we even have sapping as a siege option in the current game, but your attacking army would have to siege for 2 turns. And as players of a video game, we tend to be rather impatient, and thus siege weapons are provided. Which in all honesty, I think going forward, the inclusions of siege weapons is probably fine. Total War has never been about being a 100% historically accurate battle simulator, but rather a solid historically themed strategy game that offers the grand real-time strategy battle element that you can't find in many other games. But perhaps instead of having siege weapons be a recruitable unit for your armies to keep at all time, have them as deployables that you can only summon during siege battles at the expense of military supplies rather than time. For example, now when you encounter a siege battle, you can either wait and sap the enemy walls or build a dirt ramp as a new option, or you can trade in your military supplies for siege weapons immediately to assist you in the siege. This way, military supplies becomes much more useful. Your armies will no longer be forced to have a siege weapon at all times, which ends up forcing you to take a strategist, and you're also not forced to wait extra turns for sieges, assuming you have enough military supplies to launch a siege, as sieges are historically often a supply race between the attackers and defenders. Now, apart from ahistorical siege weapons and the need to have one in every army, defensive towers also needs a major overhaul in the next title. The fact that watchtowers fire automatically regardless of presence of nearby units, it's a major problem in Three Kingdoms. Half of the battle exploits, or cheese as people like to call them, comes from these defensive watchtowers. First, their ability to fire non-stop without the aid of any friendly unit makes them, rather than the garrison, the strongest obstacle in any siege battle. Second, the current capture points of these watchtowers are highly prioritized by the AI units in terms of their coding. This means if I try to capture any tower under the enemy control, all enemy units will beeline to defend it, regardless of where they are on the map, even if they are in the middle of a fight or have no vision of the given capture point. They are simply hard-coded to defend these, which makes them incredibly predictable to the point where you can control their movements during any siege battle just through these capture points alone. And all this can be avoided if siege tower capture points are removed and replaced with a nearby unit activation mechanic where a friendly unit must be within a certain distance for the watchtower to even function. But what I really want, and will probably never get for any Total War game, is for watchtowers to be removed entirely, as I feel like they're just incredibly lazy design choice on how to give a force multiplier to a defensive garrison. In my opinion, using the same settlement level up mechanic as we currently have in the game, anything below a small city tier, which are wallless, should just have no towers. It is just a glorified village where you have some street fighting. Now, with siege towers littered across these towns, they are orders of magnitude easier to defend, especially since their town plaza is a capture point and not a victory point, which is entirely a different problem. Basically, towns are open field battles where one side gets 20 extra towers, and that's just ridiculous. In reality, if these towns aren't important enough to build a wall, then they're just not important enough to be defensive points, and if you're attacked, you should lose these fights. But if you do reach a small city level, you can now have a wall. But instead of being lazy again and having the same wall design for every single level, these early level cities should have a packed dirt wall, which is not very high. Units can still garrison on top of the wall and have advantage over the attackers, but there shouldn't be any watchtowers or bastions on these walls. And for attackers, these walls can be easily scaled with minimal penalty to fatigue, and can also be destroyed by siege weapons. Then if you level up to a higher level city, you now get a fort over the main gate, much like the current game, but instead of being automatic, it requires you to have a friendly unit nearby to activate. But more importantly, the walls would upgrade to have a stone wall exterior, where it's now taller. You can still scale these walls, but at a much steeper fatigue penalty, and most importantly, these stone walls can't be destroyed by siege weapons, as even gunpowder weapons in later eras had trouble with stone walls with packed earth interiors. This design forces attackers to instead focus on the gate, which has historically always been the weak point in any sort of wall setup, and makes the ram the primary weapon of attack. And like trebuchets, you can trade smaller supplies for a ram rather than weight. Next, as we move to even higher tier settlements, we are going to be adding an interior wall around the main gate. The Chinese called these wengcheng, as gates were known as the weakest point in a defense. So they essentially built an additional fort surrounding the main gate. So the moment the gate breaks down, the attacker floods in, they find themselves in a plaza surrounded on all four sides by more walls with another gate to go through. And above that gate would be another fort, which you can power with a unit, as you can put range units around all four sides, so that this plaza becomes a kill zone for the attackers as they must struggle through yet another gate to enter the main city. Now, of course, with things like turtle formations available in the game, attacking unit can have a turtle formation unit move in and maybe scale the walls to kill off some of the range units on top and take control of these forts before bashing down another gate, as each gate would cause the ram to get destroyed. So if you have a wengcheng situation, you might need a second ram, or you just need to get troops on top of the wall, beat the defenders, capture the gate from the other side, open them for your units to flood in afterwards. But regardless, this type of design on the city gives the defender a force multiplier rather than giving them basically machine guns in a form of a watchtower. And if we move up to really high tier cities, then I think a moat should be added to the outside of the city, which eliminates ladders for all other parts of the city and essentially make gates the only point of attack, which is why we have a fort on top and also why we have rams. And if the city goes even higher level, what you could do is add an interior moat with multiple layers of wengcheng, as in key cities throughout Chinese history, having 3 interior forts after a gate is very common. And the most important thing with this new design is defenders will actually have a point to defend and have clear defensive positions to deploy early on in the battle, which reflects how cities with walls were designed in the first place. Of course, with such an impressive design, if you had a full army garrisoning in a high tier city, it would be pretty much impossible to attack. which in my opinion is how things were historically. Either you had to bring in a force that was 5 or 10 times larger to take down a city in a hard siege battle, or you just surrounded them and hoped to starve them out, as this larger force would have to consume more supplies, thus leading to faster attrition. Now, this idea is probably not easy to implement, as CA probably have to start from scratch for not only the city layout designs, but also the siege battle AI for defenders and attackers, as they have to be taught how to fight and defend these battles. But if they do pull this off, I think it would be a tremendous improvement over the current system. So that's going to end our discussion on siege weapons and siege battles. Next week, this series will actually take a short hiatus, as there are some scheduling changes happening to the channel that I can't share at this time. But the series will return the following week, as we'll continue to talk about unit designs and counter matchup changes that I would like to see in the new title. So until then, bye!